Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Coach's Corner. I am your host, Jeffrey David Hartford, and the coach. That's the conduit of optimism, altruism, consciousness, and health. And today I have with me none other than the host of a Wonder Junkie podcast, Ryan Anderson. Ryan, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, brother.
It's my pleasure. I knew, I've already mentioned the retreat to the audience so many times, they're probably getting sick of it at this point, but it was truly life-changing for me. And as I came over to your breathwork class, I got that vibe instantly that we were going to click, and what the class meant to me, I knew we were going to be getting you on here and diving deeper. And it's really cool. I actually, you looked familiar, but I didn't want to be that guy that was like, hey, I think I know you. And what I realized was I had seen your episode with Dr. Jack Cruz prior to the retreat. And I went back to double check it just to be sure. I said, oh, yep, sure enough. I've already seen this. This is good stuff. And I can't wait to dig in with you. And I mean, man, in so many different ways, I see you as this form of a modern day Renaissance man, audience. Ryan's a firefighter. He's a breathwork coach. He is very passionate about curiosity, which I can absolutely relate to. And, as given up by the title of the podcast, a wonder junkie. I mean, I'm so intrigued. I've listened to quite a few of your different episodes now, and I love the different directions you go in. So I guess all that being said, that's kind of the overview I know of you, but tell us a little more about you. What got you into each of the things that you're in, and who is Ryan Anderson?
Yeah, thanks, man. It's nice to be on the receiving end now. I'm used to, interviewing different guests, so it's fun to be on the other side of the table. That retreat was amazing, and it was really nice meeting you and everybody there. It was such a cool group of people. So I think about it all the time, and I'm excited to do more of those because it's easy when you start diving into this stuff, especially circadian biology type stuff, to feel alienated and to feel like, man, like even this morning I went on a bike ride. And I couldn't help but notice, not judging, but just notice how many people are plugged into their Apple headphones or whatever it is, looking at a screen and usually have sunglasses on. I even saw one dude riding with a mask on, so I just, you're like, wow, this is interesting. Not many people, and they just don't know. And you're not going to pull over and be like, hey, take your sunglasses off and start preaching to them about this. It's just fascinating. And so when you go to a group like that and you start to see everybody that's tuned into this stuff, some far deeper than I've ever been, it was just refreshing and nice to feel like you had a little community out there of people that understand and you can relate to. So that was awesome. I had a great time there. It was nice meeting you. It was easy to share breath work there. So Carrie Bennett had me come out there and I didn't have any expectations. I just went to share a little breath work and attend the event, and it was awesome. I look forward to connecting with more people like that. Yeah. How did I get into all this stuff? It's just life. I look at life like it just unfolds, and each person comes out of the womb and we start to get conditioned and programmed, and we have an essence. I like to think about consciousness a lot. And I always think about how much older we are. We come through the birth canal with, I think, an essence, an older element. You could call it your spirit, whatever it is. But I think it's, the nature nurture conversation's always been fascinating to me from a young age because I was adopted. So me and my sister have different biological parents raised in the same household since day one. For me, I think she actually spent a couple months away from my parents before she came in, but I got to see her go down a different path. And from an early age, she's a couple years older. She suffered quite a bit and she had a lot of issues with her adoption. And I always somewhat felt lucky and didn't suffer too much from it. I don't know why. I don't take responsibility for that or credit for it. So I've always had an essence of feeling lucky. And all my good friends know that. I say it all the time. And I think when you truly feel lucky, it creates a little more luck, if you want to call it that. And I think when people say, well, you're not lucky, you did all this, or you created this, or I've had people try to correct me and say, well, you have been blessed, or there's different ways of different people correcting me. And I always say, no, I'm going to stick to what I feel, which is lucky. And it works for me. And it's not something that I knew I was doing when I was little, but I started to also witness what happens when you feel victimized and resentful, and you're always seeking to look at what you don't have. So I've always been very curious about the nature of consciousness from an early age. I didn't realize I was so curious about it until I got a little older and started exploring it deeper, like psychedelics, plant medicines, things like that, float tanks, which we can get into when and how that looked for me. I didn't have any reading about those things. I dived right in.
Yeah.
When I started doing those practices, it made me realize and look back at my early years and see just how much each element of our cultural conditioning, and it just makes you curious, at least for me.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, it's not comfortable to start probing at those things. And I think that's why most of us stay busy and we stay, just stimulated and activated, and we don't want to reckon with the slowing down, the letting go. So that's something that I started to force myself to do. Probably around 29 or so is when I started to just realize that I wasn't comfortable being still. I got on my first float probably around that time, 28 or so. And I remember wanting to get out of the float tank. And so I forced myself to keep going back because I realized I wasn't content with being slow and being still and feeling and just reckoning with the nature of consciousness. And I didn't understand myself. I think I was just automated. And so I went back a few times, and I remember on my third float, I started to see my thoughts separate from myself, and that was profound. I had read zero books about meditation, mindfulness, any of this stuff. And I remembered going next door, there was a little store named AJ's, and I would journal for like an hour. And it would just, I thought I was like the first person in human history to have these profound experiences I was having, these out of body experiences. I started believing in telepathy and inner healing, and started realizing like I could use my consciousness to go inward and have that introception. And I had a back injury at the time and was told I needed surgery. And so I was frustrated, and, I thought I was invincible like most of us do in our 20s, and working out and doing CrossFit and all these extreme workouts with zero embodiment. I didn't have a connection to the breath. I didn't have a connection to my body. And you get an injury like that, and it's humbling. And it actually forces you to either slow down or to medicate and to manage symptoms and to go along with the centralized medical model and to just move forward and ignore it, which is what most people end up doing. And I was like, I'm not doing that. I need to figure this out, because my back injury has probably a lot more to do with my nervous system and my mind. And so I started seeking a lot of different paths of healing that had zero to do with things that I was taught growing up. And that's a little bit of how I got started. Was my early years, I didn't really play sports. We were poor growing up. So I worked since I was probably 15 years old. I was roofing. And then I bought my first car for $1,000. And then during high school, I would pay for a lot of my own school lunches, my own clothes. And I didn't want to make things harder on my parents. So I always had this really natural self-discipline and, I guess, self-reliance, if you will. I didn't want to be a burden on my parents, being that they were not very wealthy. So I started working, and I worked all through high school, and then I moved out at 19 and just started going from there, seeking firefighting. And we can get into more of how that trajectory worked if you want, but the overview is just curiosity about the nature of consciousness and the nature of suffering. And being a firefighter for 20 years now, I've seen plenty of it, the worst case scenarios. And also I've seen plenty of the first responders that I work with suffering. I even share breathwork now with some of the guys and gals that are not able to be on the truck because of the things that compound over time if we don't manage it. Even if you do manage it, sometimes it's just like we need help externally. We need other people to help us in different ways, which I've received plenty of myself. So it's easy to describe and discuss a lot of this stuff, and I could keep on going, but I think I'll pause there and we'll start going into different directions, and I'll let you guide this.
I love it. And that's beautiful. Starting out at the premise of being the lucky one and being curious about consciousness and such, I think that in and of itself has set you up for a life of real success and authenticity. That you talked about the circadian stuff and how so few people are kind of aware of it, and how you're not going to pull over and tell them. Honestly, it's conversations like this, I believe, that is how we convey it to people. And the people that are meant to receive the message will come across it and will hear it. And it'll at least plant the seed. And that idea of the lucky one, I've got a client that's 92 years old. And he lost his wife about 10 years ago. And every story he tells me about, he regularly refers to himself as the lucky one. And I told him, we've really got to get him, whether I write it for him and he just tells me or he writes it himself, he's got to write his life story, because that mindset alone is the reason that he is here at 92 years old, still thriving, still improving. And I see the same path for you. You know, there's that mindset versus the other that you talked about, the victimhood side of it. There's a point at which the work of Dr. Bruce Lipton, for example, and our subconscious programming, there's a point at which we have to recognize that our thoughts, our actions, our beliefs aren't necessarily our own choice, but it becomes, so therefore it's kind of not our fault, if you will, if you want to point fingers, but it is our responsibility to do something about it. And we have to evaluate, is it serving me? And if it isn't, being brutally honest with yourself and saying, all right, well, what can I do differently? So I love the story that you did all that on your own at 29, when that prefrontal cortex was fully developing between 25 and 30. You had that experience. You took it upon yourself to sit in that float for a third time before you finally really got that feeling, because you knew sitting still was difficult. I mean, there's so many different aspects of that story I could dive into for an hour, each of them, you know, and
Mm.
trying to convey that to people. So, yeah, I guess what I would ask then is, let's definitely get into a little bit more of what got you into the firefighting, where and when you got into the breath work. And I guess that the aspect of, and it seems like it's just very intuitive for you, is where it seems like it comes from. For me personally, I start out with the semantic knowledge and a little bit of the experience, and then I try to bridge the gap. Yours is experience, 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 and then you're learning some of it semantically after the fact and connecting some dots as well. Yeah, what got you into the
Mm.
firefighting? What got you into getting credentialed as a breathwork coach and so on?
Mm.
Maybe we can dive a little deeper
Yeah.
into those.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And the storytelling piece, like you said, with that 92-year-old guy,
Yeah,
I've been listening to a lot of Joel Salatin lately because I'm having him come on next week. He's an amazing thinker.
awesome. Yeah,
And he brings that up where he goes, eventually you gotta, if you really want to share things or if you really want to have an impact, you go from, he was the lunatic farmer and he's doing all this, work in the third dimension, which we all do to some degree. But at some level, you gain wisdom and insight and you learn a lot. And you have an obligation, in my opinion, at some point to share linguistically, storytelling. And so that's even how, like, for me, podcasting is so powerful. That didn't exist for most of human history, but now we can learn so quick and so fast and hear other people's stories. And I think it's so much more powerful than we could even wrap our head around. I've learned so much insight from listening to different people's perspective that I really think it's the coolest thing ever. And the fact that you and I can speak through space and time, through this technological achievement that we've created, to me, it's incredible. So I never get rid of the awe and the wonder of just the medium that we're using right now to convey. And then we don't know who's going to listen. There could be someone that's suicidal or they're not doing good and they just need that one little spark to realize, holy shit, I relate to that person. So I'm
yeah,
all about connecting and sharing and learning. And so that's what we're doing here. And I appreciate you bringing that up with that 92-year-old, because that's powerful and you should capture his essence.
yeah.
And I'll go back now. I guess firefighting, I was young. I didn't know what to do. I grew up in a small military town. And so I thought I was going to join the military, to be honest. And September 11th happened the year after I graduated. So it would have been a whole different trajectory, but I chose not to join the military because my best friend, I was going to be a Marine or go that avenue in the beginning. My best friend, he had a girlfriend for like 5 years and she got in a car accident and died. And it just crushed him. And so he moved up to Flagstaff, which is a little town in northern Arizona. And I just knew I needed to like be with him because he just wasn't doing good. And I love the guy. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to go up there. I'll go to school and I'll start studying. I think I was studying just to be a cop in the beginning or a first responder in general, because I knew I wanted to do something exciting. And as I go back in time, I saw crazy stuff when I was younger. Like a kid chopped his whole hand off in my woodshop class freshman year. And I saw the firemen come and they were so calm and they handled it and they flew this kid to the other town. I've seen car accidents where I would pull over and I would help and first responders would come. And so I had a couple incidents where I saw the helpers. But I also think archetypally, I probably, if you go back through time, because I do believe we're much older, have that orientation. Like if something's going on, I go towards it and I want to help. So I'm never really, I don't think we always choose what we want to do. It sort of finds us energetically, magnetically. So I was drawn to be of service in some way where I could deal with high stress incidents, if you will. And I do well with that. I've been blessed to have a lucky situation where my body and my nervous system and my orientation is that way. And there's other people that are gifted in so many other ways. So I think I just doubled down on it and started to go those avenues. And, I lived up there with him for a year. He was studying business, and I eventually moved down to Phoenix because they had a good fire academy. And I started testing and I got hired like right away. And so I've been here ever since. It's kept me grounded here because it gives you quite a bit of freedom and a lot of time off, which is a blessing, or it can be a curse if you don't know what to do with it. So
Sure, sure.
at first I was just having fun, being a young man and enjoying my time off. And I was also selling cabinets on the side, doing some side hustles, but I was not thinking a lot about spirituality, consciousness. What does it mean to be human? I sort of grew up Christian, and I had a baseline, I guess, not programming, but my initial relationship to what God and universe was basically a Christian story, which is beautiful. And it gave me this higher power. And I was very okay with that. I didn't look too deeply into it. I just prayed at night, did a typical prayer where you beg for things and say, please, 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 gimme, 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 and thank you, and move on. And then I didn't really think about God much through the week. And then, at night I would maybe have a little baseline prayer that was on automation, and I'd go to sleep. And I think that actually served me well because I did believe in good and bad. And I always felt that there was a lot of judgment, I guess you will, for my actions. But I also had this interesting relationship to God where I was like, well, as long as I believe that Jesus died on the cross for me, I can do whatever I want because he already saved my sins. So I think that I didn't give it enough curiosity and wonder and explore those subjects until I hurt my back. And when I hurt my back at 29 and it slowed me down, it was just this humbling moment of like, geez, what if I can't be a firefighter? What am I going to do for a job? What? I started getting really curious, and I also wanted to heal and not be in pain. I couldn't put my shoe on. So there was all this stuff hitting me. And that's when I got a dog, which, believe it or not, became my greatest teacher because she was so present and she helped me to slow down and want to be home more. So instead of being on the hamster wheel and being busy, I actually just started staying home, and I started, going on walks. I never really did that. So I start looking back, and you're like, geez, my dog actually became an incredible pivot point for me because she stopped the socializing and the busyness, made me spend some more time alone and feel content with that. And then alongside with floating and trying to get comfortable being still, I was introduced to some plant medicines. A friend of mine gave me some, and that blew my mind and made me question everything. I remember it being so radical and so profound. I mean, I stared at this giant mandala for 4.5 hours, and it just took me on this incredible journey of human history. And you could say that to someone who's never had an experience like that, and they wouldn't at all relate.
Yeah.
But people that have, they know exactly what I'm talking about. It blew my mind. And I did not know what to do. The next day, I'm like, what the fuck am I going to do? Now
Mm.
what? Now my whole religious programming, and this is the reason I don't encourage people to do this. It's because you're going to change, and you can't look beyond the veil and forget that. It's like if you go to Japan and you see how weird it is there, and you come back and try to go back to work and act like you didn't go there, it's impossible. You went to another world. There's another culture. There's another language. There's a whole different set of ways of operating. And it's incredible. Tokyo will blow your mind. Other places will change the way you think. So when you go on a trip internally like that, you can't just put it away and move forward. So that really cracked me open. And that really led me to wanting to focus all of my energy on that, on exploring consciousness, reading books. So I didn't read books until that time frame, and other than mandatory reading in high school, which I would skip through and read cliff notes and just pencil whip the paper. And I didn't know how powerful reading was. So I started becoming an avid reader. I read a book a week. Still to this day, I read like mad. And I started reading a lot of Eastern philosophy and Zen and yoga. And I started going to yoga, and I started connecting with the breath. And I started realizing my mind body was not connected. And so it was like this exponential growth phase where I feel like I woke up, and I'm still waking up. I don't think you're ever there, but you go from like sleeping to like full on, like, what the hell is going on? Very common for many people throughout all of history. Hopefully, people can land the ship and have integration and all that. But a lot of times, like even for myself, I really got lucky. I lucked out to find mentors and teachers and books and YouTube videos and podcasts to help me work through this radical change of consciousness. And now for people, when they're interested in, say, a psychedelic or something really mind altering or nervous system changing, I'm conservative with it, because I don't want to go too far in the weeds too quickly, but I also started to get really curious in the floats about my programming, like you said, with Lipton and all these guys that talk about you are not your thoughts. Most of that shit was handed to you by your culture. And as soon as I started to really see that my teachers and my parents and my programming through screens, television, movies, it immediately makes you curious, who created all this stuff? At least for me. And I didn't have kids or a wife or anyone else, taking my time. So I was able to dive in, and I started to find the history of the school system, the education system. There's all these really good books, like John Taylor Gatto's an amazing writer on that subject. Then I started to discover, just reading history, seeing how did we get here, and reading all kinds of weird stuff that I had never been exposed to. If you look at my library, it's like, you're not going to find this stuff in the traditional library. And I started really getting interested in learning about the history of shamanism and the history of psychedelics and ancient civilizations. And then I found MK Ultra stuff about 10 years ago, maybe even more, and saw that there was intentional actors that had highly developed, sophisticated mind control capacities, and they were implementing them on our own citizens. The CIA had been developing these incredible programs, and they branched off into all these little subcategories. And it got really interesting to me to start seeing how psychedelics and a lot of the languaging that we were being conditioned to suck down was changing our whole culture and directing us in ways that we didn't even know. So that's always been a fascinating piece of this too, is to just get curious and to be open. And I wasn't in fear, which is a big component of this. If you're going to go into psychedelics or float tanks or reading weird shit, you better first build a relationship to something bigger than yourself and feel safe and rooted. And I look at it as almost not entertainment, but as, I have an incredible, huge capacity now to read and to dive into the shadow stuff of self and other. But that didn't just come overnight, and nor did I even have the languaging to say that to myself at the time. Came from mentors and teachers and books. And I'm lucky. I really did land the ship, because there was a time where my hair grew long and I was trying to tell everyone they should eat mushrooms. That's very typical too, the evangelical hippie. That's like, oh man, this is going to be great. If everybody does this stuff, they're going to be better. And so part of my journey also showed me how many bad actors are doing all this stuff and amping up their egos, and how it's not like these things are just tools of healing. They're just non-specific amplifiers. And so if you haven't worked through some stuff, and if you're not working through some stuff, you're just amping, you're turning the volume up on your stuff. And that was happening to me. So then I got really interested in grounding and disregarding all of these non-ordinary states, because I was getting ungrounded myself, which makes you super suggestible to the cultural conditioning that we're all a part of. And before you get into these super suggestible, ungrounded states, you had better find a rooted foundation. That's at least where I started to discover my journey. And so I was really big into connecting with the breath, connecting with nature, spending lots of time alone in nature, unplugged, which I think is incredible medicine and opportunity to see what's real, what's true, what's older than you. I got to live with an amazing man named Don Howard, who I met in Peru, who was an elder that was so grounded and helped so many people. We get into that a little bit later. His sister, who's a mentor friend of mine. So I've been meeting these incredible elders who are grounded. But all in all, I went into a lot there. but I just am I'm very conservative in my approach now when it comes to people diving into weird esoteric stuff because it's destabilizing. And if you're going
Mhm.
to get destabilized, which can be so healthy, it can change you really quickly. And I think they can be tools of transformation, which I've seen over and over again. But I've also witnessed, especially now with the promotion of psychedelics for tools for healings, for trauma culture, and all this stuff, the big pharmaceutical companies and the investors that are involved and the old MK Ultra programming that no one wants to dig up and look at has gotten far more sophisticated, more advanced, and more implemented into all these different avenues. And these poor young kids that are coming up and older people that I know have zero history of this stuff. And so they're
Mhm.
more suggestible and more manipulatable than ever before. And so, anyway, it's a lot to unpack, but I'm a big advocate for psychedelics only if you have a good foundation and you genuinely know the history and you start to work with it in a slower way. And the breath is the first thing I think people should connect with, you know?
Yeah,
So,
that's
where
beautiful.
do you want to go
And
from there?
you're
That's a lot.
Man, we could go down so many different ways, but I think what I'll do is, as I listen to all of that, what I was trying to, not even trying, just kind of connected some dots. You're
Mm-hmm.
really talking about your own personal journey out of the disempowerment paradigm and into this empowerment paradigm, and you found your own path that it was fueled by an intuitive sense, and you found some teachers and you found some coaches and such along the way. And before I forget, I'll ask Don Howard. That name rings a bell. Is that the gentleman that Aubrey Marcus speaks of as well? Do you happen to know?
Yeah, he made a documentary film on him at the end of his life and did some stuff. But Howard was very under the radar for his whole life. Never self promoted, didn't have any videos. His website was all languaging, no photos. And he
Mm,
was down there for 25, 30 years, serving
wow.
Wachuma, ayahuasca, taking people on these pilgrimages and all that. But I ended up living with him because he was dying of a rare blood disorder, and I went to his last ceremony and then brought him back with me and his family. They all lived in my home for 6 months, and I became a caretaker for him and also just friend. And it was just an interesting chapter that was unplanned, just like life, you know?
Yeah, man. Everything you tell, every story you tell, I'm getting chills. Like there's a deeper and deeper layer to you that I think so many people can learn from. And I do. I truly believe I see it through this lens of breaking this paradigm of disempowerment, breaking these systems that you allude to with MK Ultra and such. And I mean, quite literally down to these devices, these, if you listen to Dr. Cruz talk about it, it's the same thing. We're doing it through light now and we're manipulating people. So, to your point, I definitely believe psychedelics play a role. And I think we make endogenous chemicals and endogenous DMT in a deep meditative state. So we can do the work and tap into it without utilizing the plant medicines to take us to that next level. I think that's the starting point. And it sounds like that's where you did start with the breath work, with the float tank. And we really begin to heal ourselves from within so we can, bridge this gut brain access, the gut heart access, the heart brain access, that everything is connected within the body, but we're just so busy. We're in such a state of chaos. We're so programmed to just be a part of the rat race, be in the matrix. And you felt called, and very similar journey that I'm on, deep meditations, deep breath work that has brought me on astral projections and experienced my spirit leaving my body. And, again, similar to what you said regarding the people that have done the journeys, they know what you mean as you're sitting there and you're getting lost in the mandala. And for me, getting lost in an astral projection, for somebody that hasn't experienced it, they might eye roll and, dismiss it and move on. But the people that have experienced it, they know exactly what I'm talking about, and they've been there and done it. And again, I
Mm-hmm.
think it's through storytelling that we convey this to people and we open their eyes to what it is we are capable of, in our spirit's time here in these human forms. Our
Mm-hmm.
spirit will continue on significantly longer, and it has, as you alluded to before. We're a whole lot older than my almost 45 years on this earth. My spirit, I have a deep sense of connection to a part of me that is so far beyond this body that's sitting here. And
Mm-hmm.
it's wild. This happens to me a lot when I'm sitting here having these conversations. I'm listening to you speak and I'm almost forgetting that we're having a conversation and that I'm hosting this podcast. I feel like I'm listening to somebody else's podcast and getting lost in it. But yeah, I think I want to get your reaction then to this concept of the disempowerment versus the empowerment paradigm, because without necessarily thinking about it through that lens, you're telling that story. And I wonder if there's been a consciousness of you in your journey that has felt that, or if now that I plant that seed, if you can kind of see your journey a little different.
Yeah. You know, disempowerment, and think the thing that I started to realize is it takes courage to be free. And it takes a massive amount of responsibility to be the one that's like, yeah, I'm going to own this. There's no one, no government, no religious thing. And I respect, first of all, I want to say I respect all religions, you know, as far as people's belief systems and the way that they want to orient, because I have guys at work that I work with and friends and family that have different belief systems. And I've realized who am I to say what they should believe? Like, and also what works for them is beautiful. How is their character? How are they showing up every day? That's more of what I care about. And I also realize people are doing their best, you know, and they're all being hammered with all this influence. And most people don't have the time and space to take a breath and to focus on it. They're trying to survive. And the culture that's been created over time has been created for distraction and consumption, at least our culture. And so, you know, if you want to be distracted with vape pens and TikTok and consuming and buying and da, 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 it can go on and on. I also have empathy for that person because they don't even know that it's happening. They're just trying to feel good, you know? And so the judgment and all the other stuff, I tried my best. I'm not good at it, but I'll be better when I'm 72. As Don
Mhm.
Howard would always say, you're doing great, you know, but he would always show me the example by doing it so well. But he spent years seeing through, and he saw me as an incredibly, he just saw me with his heart, you know, something that's hard to do, you know. And I respect Dr. Jack Cruz so much. He's so intelligent. His recall is amazing, but man, he's carried a burden for all those years. And so when you communicate with someone like him, it's a whole different experience than talking to Don Howard. And some of those types of people, I've even realized I don't take that personal. That guy's holding a burden of pain because his mind is so sharp and broad and he wants to help people and he's frustrated. So I really try to look at people now to the best of my ability with as much awareness as possible. And when you start to bringing awareness as the key thing to want to focus on, at least for me, I want to have more awareness, more lucid ability to be in this thing we call life. I want to be here. And most of it we're not. And that's great. You know, even that I don't judge. I'm like, all right, half of my day I was unconscious, just moving through it. But there's this cultivation of awareness that comes with the breath, even paying attention to the breath, that brings this lucid experience in. And as I've gone through all my journey, that's what I want. I want to be free and I want to be present. I want to be in the thing, you know, and I want everyone else to as well. And I can't control everyone else, nor is it my job, or is it even a good idea to tell others what they should do with their life. It's none of my business. But I find that the root of suffering, most of it, is this rumination of the mind and the conditioning. And so we have all these narratives going and they have an emotional attachment to them. And usually that's where a lot of the Western mind suffering comes from. And if you go underneath that, it's usually our lack of building a relationship with what we would call death. If for the death of this, of everything, the attachment to the ideas that we're alive. And so I've been exploring death for some time now, and I have a pretty healthy relationship with death, and even micro deaths of the fire service is coming to an end. And I actually am not identified with it. Most people don't even know I do it when I'm walking around about the planet, because I don't make it something where that's me. It's a thing that I've been doing. It's like a small memory, like high school is. It's already, I can already see that little snapshot in time where I'm like, man, that was a beautiful experience. And so when I'm there, I'm more like, hey, be lucid, be with the guys, drink the coffee, have the fun, because it's a memory already. It's already going to be a memory. we're always looking ahead and we're always thinking behind, and half of the time we're not even here. So if you want to talk about freedom and responsibility, I do think, I tell people in breathwork, a lot of my breathing facilitation, you were there for one of them, is slowing down, letting go, and being curious. Curiosity is a big component, because otherwise you're judging. Oh, am I breathing right? Oh, when is this thing going to be over? Should I even be doing this? And so you start, the mind just immediately wants to do that. What should I be doing? What, at least for me, it's always been like, what should you be doing? And it's like, well, where's the should coming from? Is that like my highest self, or is that just my conditioning from all my people around me? And so I think it's important to have sovereignty. I think, if anything, I want freedom for people. I want freedom for all beings, liberation for all beings. And I do believe that most of it is from within. I've read the books, the Viktor Frankl books, the books about the people that survived the worst case
Yeah.
scenarios. And I've been preparing for that my whole life, because it's not like it's just going to keep getting easier. I'm going to lose my parents. I haven't lost them yet. If I survive them, I'm going to have more injuries. I'm going to lose friends and family. And then there's the great reset that's trying to emerge, if you will. The people that don't know about that, well, get ready. So there's going to be a lot of stuff coming down the pipe, and it's not going to get easier before it gets better. But I think it's important for me to cultivate this inner peace and inner sovereignty, and also the ability to know that no matter what happens, it's up to me and my relationship to my experience, and to be of service, or to look at it with a certain frame. That's our superpower, is to frame our experiences in the moment, or even after the moment. You can frame it and build a narrative that's true and advantageous. And so we're storytellers internally and externally. And I'm all about self-empowerment. If you get hurt, it's like, good. That means that you're going to probably learn how to swim because you broke your foot. And now you're going to learn how to breathe in that circadian, or in that way, that rhythmic way. And I learned how to swim when I broke my foot twice and was on crutches. And I ended up meeting my best friend through it. And I ended up learning to swim, and I ended up learning all this other shit about foot health and fascia. And so I look at life as an opportunity to learn, to grow, to expand, and to also serve. And if you look around, if you want to just be blissed out, which I think a lot of the spiritual bypassers and the spiritual communities do, they just think, oh, we chose this and we're all going to transcend, and it's all about being blissed out. It's like, that's only going to hold up for a short while. Because if you do that, if you're on the yacht and you're blissed out and you think everything's great, but you see people drowning, you're sort of a psychopath to not immediately be of service and pull people on the ship. And
Sure.
so you got to find the balance, at least for me, of serving and enjoying, savoring and and enjoying. I think it's like Jamie Wheal quotes this all the time, where he says, if you wake up torn between saving the world and savoring it, it's not worth saving if you can't savor it too. So how do you balance just go on a bike ride, enjoy the day, but also like write a program tonight when you get home for first responders so they can connect with their breath? Like, what would you have wanted to know when you were 23? And that gives
Bingo.
me fuel and energy. When I
Yeah.
create programs and when I do my podcast, I've done 96 already in like 15 months. That's easy for me. And it wouldn't be easy for someone else, but I love it. I love learning. I love sharing. So it's giving me life force energy. And so I've realized, like, if you're doing things that fuel you and you're helping others, man, there's infinite energy behind that. You could do all the circadian shit you want. You could do all the health biohacks you want. But if you're not somewhat finding your meaning and mission and all that stuff, it's almost pointless. I've seen the crazy biohacker that comes in and he's got all the shit and it doesn't work. If you don't have those foundational roots dug in, like, why are you here? What are you doing? So anyway,
That's
I'm
right.
going into some tangents, but that's the way if you ask me about freedom and sovereignty, I really believe that's our superpower. And we can disregard it and go, no, I want someone to tell me what to do with my life, or you can take
Right.
responsibility and take full ownership and go, I'm going to take the burden of being responsible for every breath, for every thought, for every this and that, and take it easy at the same time. Be like, all right, but also feel lucky that you're here. You don't even know what this is. A lot of my philosophical orientations now is to get to the foundation of what's genuinely true. And I've done this over and over again in a deep plant medicine experience or whatever it is. You can have all the stuff going on, but what's underneath it is, why are you afraid? What are you afraid to lean into here? Are you worried to die? Are you worried that you're going to get possessed by some entity? I mean, what are all these fears that people try to program you with? And then I go, well, bring it on. Like I lean into it and I go, I don't even know how we got here, to be honest. There's something happening from nothing. I'm having an experience. I'm aware. It's like the awe and the wonder kick in, and the humility kicks in. You're like, I didn't do anything. I'm just breathing. I'm being breathed. There's energy happening. There's awareness. There's all this shit going on. And to me, that's humbling. The mystery is the answer to me. And so for me, I lean into the mystery with curiosity and wonder. And that is my relationship to this thing. And then try to do no harm and try to learn how to make things better for others. Pretty simple. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. I'm okay with not knowing. I think that's a surrender and a faith too. And I think it's hard for people to get there. It's not like I got there overnight, but it sure works for me. But if you want to cling to some ideology or some belief or whatever that works for you, try it out. But I know that the foundation can be dismantled if you really get down to it. I've dismantled mine to the point where I don't have many beliefs left. And I don't need them. It's all BS. Belief systems are BS. And
That's right.
I just get to the truth. If you seek the truth, it's like, all right, what's true? Well, I'm here. You're here. Supposedly, there's something. I've interviewed the best scientists of the brain, and they don't know what the fuck's going on either.
I think that's
So
one of the most empowering things when you speak to people who are truly, really, really intelligent and really, really have studied and dug into it, and they're honest with you and they tell you the truth. They're like, I have no fucking clue. That is so empowering because the average person is led to believe that, think about back to your point about the education system. We are programmed in this education system that we are nothing, we aren't smart enough, sit down, shut up, listen to this authority figure tell you the information, and you're supposed to just accept it and regurgitate it and give it back. And if you give it back properly, you get a pat on the back and a sticker on your sheet and good little boy, good little girl. And that's where a lot of the fear comes from, because then you get into the real world and people are looking around like, well, who's going to tell me what to do? I'm so used to being told what to do from kindergarten through at least 12th grade, let alone if you go on and pay for it in university. And that's a whole nother conversation, right? The debt that comes with that, the interest rate, and boy, it doesn't
mhm.
have return on investment. But you've touched upon so many different things, and it really, to me, it starts with your curiosity. You mentioned it already that you don't have a fear. So you have this, you're present, you're focusing on your consciousness, you're remaining curious, and you don't have a fear. And I think right there is such a foundation to build from. And if the average person listening to this that is in a state of fear, that is still plugged into the matrix, that still feels lost, and God forbid if they're watching the corporate news and whatever side of the aisle they've chosen to identify with and follow, and they're a part of this system, it's unplug, spend some time in nature, spend some time alone, spend some time in silence, get to a point where you can just be present and conscious, get curious, eliminate that fear, and then just see where it brings you. I think
Mm.
we're programmed to seek answers from some external source and external validation. And if we just sit with it ourselves and we explore and, yeah, get in the tub like you did, go do some meditation, do some breath work, get present. And then, if and when you're ready, if you feel called to, spend some time with a plant medicine that can open up a whole nother level for you of consciousness and see things differently. And I mean, man, if more and more of us continue down that path, that is a serious threat to the system, and we'll
Mm.
see where that takes us, right? I mean, yeah,
Yeah. And
you talked
the
before.
fear may be there too, maybe the fear is still there. I don't have a fearlessness, but there's less fear than there was because I wondered about it. I got curious about, like, well, what is that?
Sure,
If
sure.
you eat a heavy edible and you're in public and you get that, like, my God, I can't even function right now. But then it's sort of like, well, how interesting, maybe I should just admit that this is the state I'm in. I'm on a heavy gummy. Can you just tell me what's good to eat here? And
Yeah,
you start
yeah,
to realize that the vulnerability of, like, who cares? Like, the biggest fear is what people think, right? That's what
that's right.
traps 99% of us. That's why public speaking is the number one fear for humans beyond death. And so the fear is there. It actually gives you energy, and you can transmute it into fuel of curiosity and wonder. And I think it, like, instead of trying to get rid of the fear, it's like, no, don't get rid of your ego. Build a relationship with it, with curiosity. And this whole idea of ego death and all this. Don't kill your ego. You need it. I need my ego, my little personality, and all these things. It's part of you. It's like trying to chop your hand off. I'd rather understand it and get into it and not just amplify it, unconsciously, but maybe even cultivate it. I have to put on a hat when I go to the fire station and play a little role. And I have to put on the breathwork hat and I have to be as nice as I can. I'm the nicest version of myself when I have people driving across town to be vulnerable. So I'm like super connected to my heart there, of course. That's awesome. I love being in that state. But if I was in that state at the firehouse, I wouldn't make it in that culture, and it would be very awkward, and it would be a disservice to those men. It doesn't mean that you don't still have those pieces, but Howard even helped me to realize, like, when he was the guy with all the things and he was creating that space, he was undercover. You're putting on a role, and so it's helped me to just take away the pressure of trying to just always just be yourself. It's like, well, and just speak your mind. Well, maybe not. Like, I read Thich Nhat Hanh's book, The Art of Communication, and he helped me to realize, if you want to communicate and connect with people, don't just say the same thing to one person that you'd say to the other. Like, Jack Cruz feels that way, and that's great. But I can't send Jack Cruz's podcast to my mother for that reason. He doesn't meet her where she's at, and he thinks she's just an idiot, right? And that's fine. Yes. I look at Jack Cruz like a hippo, a big old savage in the nature. So you expect him to be exactly what he is. But I use him as an example because he's such a popular human right now, and he's got so much information. But he's even a good example of, like, for me, to some degree, how not to be. I don't want to be that version. I want to be kind and meet people where they're at, and I want to help the lady at the deli. And I even want to help the lady that's walking her dog with sunglasses on and she's just full of anxiety, just trying to have a good day. I don't want to just build a team of savages and hide out in a community of Bitcoiners that understand this stuff. And then you have some other cult that just eats itself. I'm looking at it like Team Human. You know what I'm saying? And I want to minimize suffering while we're here. And a lot of it does have to do with this basic fundamentals of circadian health and breath and getting a good night's rest and maybe a little journal, like all the simple stuff that's free. It doesn't require an authority figure. Like you're saying, I'm an anti-authoritarian,
Yeah.
So I didn't mean to cut you off, but I was just feeling that.
I love it. Your tangents, that's what I was going to say, is you keep bringing up that, I went on a tangent. Please keep them coming because you're full of gems. We have to go down the experience I had with you doing my breath work at the retreat and kind of get your take on it. I remember back to massage school, my day to day, I'm a massage therapist. I spend time in my clinic and school learning about this premise of emotional release. And, we're reading about it in text and hearing about it from a teacher. And I had never experienced anything like that previously. And there was I would say, almost equal parts excitement about being able to hold space for somebody and be a provider of sorts that can help them work through whatever it is they're going through and help them heal, but also a nervousness of, boy, the first time that happens, that's going to be kind of scary. Like somebody just without any control over it just has this hysterical crying fit because some emotion that was just buried within the body has now released and out it comes without their awareness and they have no control over it and they just let it go. So I was very curious about it. I was very excited about it, but I was a little nervous. And since then I've been in practice for over 10 years and a couple dozen clients have experienced it. And I've had numerous times myself. And a very, very powerful one was during your breathwork class. And I felt it coming on very early on. And I wasn't fighting it. Tears were just rolling down my face as we were laying there on the lawn and continue breathing. And by the end of it, I just felt it pouring out. And it actually continued when I went to the conference center and I spoke with Dr. Kelsey Dexter and she spent a few minutes with me and I had another release with her and we just embraced and she held space for me. And there's just something so beautiful in understanding that intellectually, first of all, that exists and learning that I've just always been a very sensitive, emotional person back to my youth. And I believe wholeheartedly that being that sensitive, emotional person that didn't know how to articulate it and let it out, I harbored so much of that. I buried so much of it actively and it would come out in anger. I would burst in anger. And I don't recall if you and I discussed this, but I was diagnosed with a kidney tumor, not this past, but last June. And I just knew my journey was going to be through discovering how to heal myself without standard of care, without fear-based paradigm telling me I have to cut it out of me and I have to use all these chemicals. It's a form of cancer, clear cell renal cell carcinoma. And
Mm.
this journey has been very powerful for me, that I just knew instantly when I got that diagnosis that I would be well, and I know
Wow.
that that timeline is coming. And this is a
Mm-hmm.
part of my journey, living through it and going within and releasing all of those emotions that I buried in there. And you, without even knowing that part of me, played a vital role in this. That emotional release I had during our breath work was a vital
Mm.
piece of my healing journey. So I guess that's
Wow.
all to lay a little bit of groundwork for you and get your reaction to that, in terms of,
Mm.
how often do you get, when you're doing group breath work, how often do you see that as well? Because I imagine, man, when people are finally really connecting with the breath, there's a lot of emotion that.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's powerful. And it's beautiful to hear testimonies like that. And also to hear that you're going that avenue. It takes courage to trust yourself and to go, you know what, I'm going to figure this out. And also have the belief, the deep belief of, I'm going to heal. That's a big state change versus the fear, which is natural to get a diagnosis and to fall into all the rabbit holes of stress and dis-ease that would manifest from that state. So I think it's amazing that you're at a place in your life where you're doing that and sharing it along the way and looking for ways to heal in that way. That's powerful. And I tip my hat to people like you, because that takes courage. And there's going to be a lot of pushback and people telling you what to do and how to heal. And it's hard to, I can't imagine. I haven't been diagnosed with that. We're all terminally ill. We're diagnosed from the birth canal, but that's amazing. So anyway, I think that's so powerful to hear. And I've had a lot of people come over the years to my workshops where they're dealing with some diagnosis or major, major stressor. And I've realized over the years too that breath work is a last resort thing that usually people find. It's not some first thing. So usually people come in distress and they're dealing with a lot. And I always say too, it's not as much about the techniques and the breath in this particular context. I've learned a lot of different breath work over the years and styles, and read plenty of books on pranayama and all the oxygen advantage stuff and Patrick McKeown's work. And it's really neat to go deep if you want to in learning about functional breathing and how to breathe on a regular basis. And then there's different breathing techniques for different outcomes, almost like a toolkit where you can use one for a headache or to boost your immune system. It's a very deep and rich subject matter. But for the stuff that I've been sharing, it is not as much about the breath as it is about the setting and the set and the disarming of people. And it's something that I didn't learn by any breath teacher. I learned it from people like Howard and his sister Retta, amazing teachers over the years, yoga teachers, and loving people that helped disarm me to feel vulnerable and safe enough to really have those experiences. The breathing's so simple when you start to learn how to use an anchor to slow down. And we can go into how I build my recipe a little bit, but the recipe came from wanting to share with people what I was experiencing at workshops, but in a more gentle way, because a lot of the holotropic stuff and Dan Burley's stuff and people that do somatic release stuff, it's all there and it does work if done in the right setting, just like psychedelics do work if done in the right setting. But they can be super damaging and they can be dismantling and disorienting, and they can bring trauma up. And who are we to be doing that to people on a Sunday night, if we're not qualified? And what are you going to do with them if they bring up some weird memory in the subconscious mind and all of a sudden they're stuck with it and now they have to confront it? Are you going to help them integrate, or are you just going to send them on their way? And so it's a really big responsibility that people probably that have never had those experiences couldn't relate to again. But I've learned over the years that through prayer and sitting with myself and learning that I am qualified. I'm actually obligated. The risk versus reward is so small. People actually have far greater risk driving to breath work to come to one of my workshops than they do leaving harmed. And so I had to look at all that and go, who am I to share this with people? And I started doing it very carefully in the backyard with friends. And I realized I'm very conservative with it, as you got to experience. It's like I really give a lot of permission to just lay there and do nothing. Make sure, because there's people that come from all walks of life. I get yoga people, and then I get just a guy that's a plumber or a first responder, or sometimes it's a special forces guy, or it's all walks of life. And so they come with all this different stuff. And each one of us has so much nervous system stuff from all of our life and then maybe even past lives. And so I don't want to go in there and just start muddling people's stuff up and ramping people up, right? It's not the right setting for that. But what I do want to give them is a lot of freedom, a lot of trust themselves. I always say to trust yourself. And I give people a nice baseline in the front end, which I think most of us need more than the ramping up, is slowing down, letting go, slowing down. And that's hard. And I tell people, if you're going to do that, that takes courage, to show up, drive across town, and to slow down and to feel, because you're feeling everything as you should. And it's hard. And if you don't like it, don't do it. Just lay there and listen to us get weird, right? I always tell people that. You want to lay there and just listen to us get weird and come back the next time and do that again and just see if this is a safe container to even try a little bit. Do that. If you want to leave, leave. Like, I really am about empowering individuals and having freedom. And so I look at it as an exploration and more of a surrender experiment, where you're experimenting with the body, the breath, you're connecting with the breath, you're feeling the power of what it can do to slow the nervous system down into that parasympathetic. And that, I tell people, do that for the whole hour if you want. That's medicine. Just connecting on a nice, slow, coherent breath. And a lot of people do that. And some of the most profound experiences I've heard are actually the slowing down people, the people that stick to that nice cadence. And then, we can go into some of the circular breathing and what that does, which is what the somatic release type stuff is. My big rule too is zero filming. I don't like the marketing of vulnerability. I think it should be almost not illegal, but people should be very careful signing waivers and being filmed during these vulnerable, intimate experiences. And then someone, goes, well, they signed a waiver. Well, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, when I went to Burning Man and was eating a psychedelic or whatever, having this profound experience, do I want that on the internet 10 years later? I was in a vulnerable place in my life and I was very much seeking and looking for all this weird stuff. Do I really want that 10 years from now captured on the internet for someone's marketing purposes? So I don't believe in that for many reasons. And it also draws a crowd of people that want to be seen being vulnerable. So it creates a false vulnerability. The whole thing's a mess. So I'm all about turn your phone off, unplug, connect with yourself. This is our space, our container. And yeah, you get lots of different responses. Some people feel blissed out and good for the first time. And some people have to go through all the stuff that's just there and they're weeping, and I've cried for 2.5 hours during one of these workshops and my hands were all cramped up and I was letting go of all this stuff. Couldn't put my mind to what it was. But it's everything, sometimes it just feels good to let go and to fully feel. And then you feel light and more free when it's over. So I'm very conservative with my approach to sharing breathing with people in that type of way. And a lot of it's really about all the stuff that surrounds it. It's not as much about breathing. It's more about connecting and trust and vulnerability. And that's why people bring their mothers and their friends. And it's all word of mouth. And people keep coming back because at some level it works. It's not something I can scale and market and try to share online and build a whole program, because people go, where did you get certified? And it's like, I have a few certifications, but that's not where I learned all this stuff.
Yeah.
You learn by doing it too. It's like even podcasting. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a white belt, but every time I get a little bit more comfortable, and then I'm learning how to listen better when I'm interviewing my people. And I think we have to learn by doing. And I started exploring the breath for like 8 years on my own before I even began to consider sharing it in any form or fashion. So I think that's a typical thing with psychedelics and these esoteric practices is people have the profound experience and they immediately want to share it.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful quality. That's not wrong. I did the same thing. You get evangelical and you're like, I want to give this away.
Mm-hmm.
Be careful because there's a lot to it. I've had Peter Levine on my podcast and I've read his books and I've read a lot of books about all these different things that have gone on through history that maybe we shouldn't be just doing that with people, stirring it up and mixing it up without a lot of context to it and a lot of careful, grounded, rooted, anchored permission in the front end. You probably got to experience, you experienced a shorter version of what I typically share, but you could tell immediately that you could feel safe in that environment. I have no doubt that you did. And if you didn't, I would make sure that you did feel safe. Otherwise, I wouldn't have even allowed you to start doing that. I'm very careful. And I think that's the big thing I like to push with this stuff is everybody's wanting to share breathwork or psychedelics, but be careful. Just be careful who you're going to be in, because you're in a super suggestible state. You are allowing me to have a lot of power in that dynamic, because now you're in a vulnerable, super suggestible state. You're in hypnosis, and that's the most powerful potential for either healing or doing what the MK Ultra folks do and creating a
Yes.
Manchurian candidate.
Yes.
This has been done, and it's being done now, and all these ketamine clinics and all the things that are opening up with the psychedelic space. You better be careful, because you're giving a lot of power and permission, and it does have the potential for exponential healing and growth, but it also has the potential for what words are coming in, what's going into my consciousness on the deepest level. You're reprogramming. And so in my workshop, as you experienced, the words coming out of my mouth are basically trust yourself, and how grateful are we to have lungs and a heart, and gratitude is medicine. And then I'm just letting you have your own experience. I'm not programming you with my belief systems and all my stuff. I have no business being inside of your head, you know? So that's a little bit of how I orient when speaking about this breath stuff.
That's amazing. That's an element that I admittedly it didn't cross my mind. And especially there, because I went to that retreat so ready for whatever the retreat was going to be. I made a pact with myself that I was going to be present and I was going to take it all in. And that's exactly what I did. And your energy just emanated. I mean, I felt, before you even spoke, I felt safe in your presence. I won't ever forget it. You literally just brought me back there talking about the hands cramping. I mean, my hands were stuck like this, and I just felt energy pulsing through my body. I felt electric, but I'll never forget it, especially at the end when I really let the emotions out and I was just laying there. I knew we had a couple dozen people there. For all I knew, everybody was huddled around me and staring at me, or nobody even noticed me being there, and neither would have mattered to me. But all I
Mm,
remember is, again, eyes were closed. I felt your hand touch my chest, and all you said was very calmly, beautiful soul. And that got me to weep even more. I mean, holding that space for me, and I mean, let's be honest, you're a big masculine dude holding that energy for a man in this space. There's something so special in that to me that our society needs more of that. It needs more
mm,
people like you who are curious, who are doing your own inner work without judgment of yourself, without judgment of others. It is so incredibly healing, so incredibly powerful. I've shared this with quite a few people, but I've kind of just through my meditations, through my journaling, I get all these thoughts that flow through me. I don't take credit for them, but they've come to me. And I kind of have these four principles that have guided me for years now that you embody completely. And it is authenticity, humility, vulnerability, and adaptability. And each one of
mm,
those you embody so incredibly well. And just the fact that you spend time explaining how it matters to you to, I don't want to record people in these vulnerable states. I don't want to capitalize on that. I just want to be there and hold space and share. And you feel almost entitled. You owe to other people, almost that they are entitled to you sharing what you've learned. And that's how I feel. I've got a buddy of mine that we've spoken on a lot of these topics, and we're all living our own journey and we all have our own story. And it is not our story to keep, it's our story to tell. And again, that's something that you embody completely. And this is awesome. This I was so excited for where we were going to go with this, and I'm not trying to wrap it up. I'm just saying this has turned into even more than I could have hoped for. You're a deep, deep human being, deep spirit, and I'm grateful we've crossed paths. This is the universe conspires when we are on purpose and we are following our passion and our purpose. The universe conspires and connects us with other souls, other spirits that we're
mm.
supposed to connect with, and it helps us heal ourselves, it helps us heal each other, and it helps us to kind of lead by example. And you're doing that, man.
Well, thanks, man. I'm doing my best, and I see that in you too. You're a reflection, That's how you're even able to see those things or orient towards them, and those are beautiful qualities. I still feel like a baby when I'm on this journey. A lot of times I'm still immature and I'm still making mistakes, and I'm not perfect. I'm human, just like you. And sometimes you just have to let go and be like, you know what, I'm doing my best. And so are you. And so is everybody else. And I appreciate that feedback, though it's encouraging. And it's nice to be seen and to hear that the stuff that I'm doing is having an impact. It really does. I always feel so lucky to be able to help people in any way, even at the fire service, if we go on calls. And like, I still feel lucky that I'm on some of the craziest situations where you're like, a lot of our therapists and our culture will tell us in this new centralized model, if you were to go to a typical therapist, some of them would actually say you shouldn't have to see a girl drown in a pool, or you shouldn't have to see that call, or whatever. And I actually don't believe in that. I actually believe I was meant to be on that call, and I'm very lucky to have the ability to, and I would do it again. You know, that's why I signed up for it. And how amazing is it that we have tools and training and equipment and a whole infrastructure where you can call a number on your worst nightmare and there's people that show up and respond. And dude, it's incredible. And yeah, I have to grieve. I'm not going to grieve in that moment when that's happening. I've learned that's when I go to someone's workshop like you did with mine, or you go up on the mountaintop and you really let it sink in and process and feel, which takes courage. I always say that in breath work is like, it takes courage to feel and to slow down. That's why we stay busy. That's why we drink alcohol. That's why we distract. And I don't blame people. Some of my best friends, I lost a good friend this year to an overdose. One of the best, coolest people I know, the funniest guy in the room. And man, I just immediately, as soon as I got the message that he died, his name is Timmy, fucking amazing guy. I have a voicemail, and you know, if I didn't have my phone as my camera, I'd play it for you, but it's so funny. And he just was so talking about Ryan, you know, he's Boston. I'm doing my breath work every day. I'm never going to get sick. And he just goes on this long rant. And so I sent that to the group text. I'm like, dude, this is gold. I just love Timmy. I love this guy. And he just loved to hit the gas pedal. I have friends that love to get drunk. I have friends that love to do drugs. I have friends that love to be busy. And so I love these people. I don't want to be in a group of people that are all figured out and perfect. I love the messy ones, the artists and the creatives and the people, the guy at the park that's this amazing artist that's always drunk. And he's like, if he could just not drink so much, he'd probably be like a millionaire because his art is so cool. But he can't.
Mhm.
He's not doing too good right now. And for whatever reason, in this lifetime, he's going to self sabotage in some way. And so be it. I'd rather just be his buddy and have boundaries, of course. Maybe he's not welcome to sleep at the house, that particular person. But when I think about humanity, I'm like, take it easy on yourself, but be hard on yourself at the same time. You know, it's a weird balance of like, how do you do? I know some people at work. There's a guy at work that's like the most disciplined guy on the planet that would never eat sugar. And he's always, you know, he played in the NFL and all this stuff. And I look up to that guy. I actually made a bracelet that says, what would Chaz do? Because he's like, I didn't know Jesus as far as like, I didn't live in that time, but I know Chaz. He's right there. And so like he's a living example of a good guy. If you ask one soul about who that guy is, they all go, oh my God, it might be the best guy I've ever met. And everyone knows that about him. And because he holds himself to such a high standard and such a high degree of accountability and all those things, he's the most humble guy I've ever met. And he makes everyone better around him by being him, his authentic self. And do you think he's getting through this thing unscathed? No way. That guy has a heart of gold. So that means he feels more than anyone. He's got
Mhm.
kids and a wife, and he's going to, you know, he could benefit someday too with connecting with the breath, and he will when the time is right. And so no one's getting through this thing without suffering and without pain and without confusion. And yeah, the nicer we can be to people and the kinder we can be to people, man, the better off we are, you know? So I'm doing my best to be a little bit more, I can be harsh on myself, which means I can be harsh on others. But I try to be like a little bit better every day. And when I'm 70 and I'm Howard's age, if I'm lucky to live that long, I hope to be a lot more like him, you know?
Amen, man. Yeah, no, I can
Yeah.
relate with so much of that. And it's interesting too, as you talk about the guy that, clean eating and doing all the quote unquote right things. There's something to be said for that so long as you really feel called to and it's what you desire and it doesn't feel like you're preventing yourself from living. Yeah, I definitely know in my circle there are people that would say that very same thing about me. I don't drink alcohol anymore. I try to eat as clean as I can. I honor my body, especially now after my diagnosis. But the cool part was I had already made a lot of those changes well before my diagnosis, which is why I knew I, I had this real sense that my diagnosis was my gift because I had already made my changes. I already feel better. I have for years. I used to have the bloat, the inflammation, even when I was in the fitness industry, doing the things that I thought were right, doing the things that we were, taught to do, and therefore that I taught people to do. But trial and error, you start to do it, you realize it doesn't serve you. And at the same time, I was also staying up late and drinking and indulging, and I had a great time with it. We had a lot of fun. So I don't
Hmm.
look back with regret, but I certainly look back and recognize that, oh, you know what? While I never would have sat down and asked for this diagnosis, my actions said something different. My
Hmm.
behaviors, my thoughts, there's a lot of things that I did that played a very active role in this outcome. And the cool part for me, the real empowering part, was the decisions that I've made, the changes that I've made, and the person that I've become since before receiving the diagnosis is already that's the trajectory I need. That is the action. That is what I need to do, the stimulus my body needs to be able to heal itself. And I just had
Hmm.
this deep knowing that the diagnosis was for a version of me who has already died and
Hmm.
he's gone. So the diagnosis can die with him and I will continue on. I have a very strange, deep intuitive sense that I'm going to live to at least 120 years old. And with that, there's just no fear of almost anything. I mean, to your point from earlier, sure, there's fear, but you might have an element of a fear of what's in that closet, but you still open the closet. You're curious. Your curiosity overcomes the fear, and you see what's in there, right? So it's yeah,
Hmm.
there's an element of fear maybe, but the curiosity is a whole lot stronger, and just kind of staying the course and maintaining those four principles. I think it's so important to have something to come back to. For some people, it's faith, and there's an aspect of faith to it as well. But find your authentic self, remain humble, be vulnerable, put yourself out there, share your story, and allow yourself to adapt, and then repeat. Keep going through
Hmm.
that checklist and allow yourself to peel the layers of the onion and find another layer of yourself. And whatever we have to offer, we're all here for a reason. And it's amazing. You tell the story of Timmy. We've all known somebody like that, right? And in their time here, as we both already touched upon here, that his soul is an awful lot older than his time on earth this go round.
Hmm.
However, we believe what happens next. But that was what he was supposed to do in his time here. It sounds like he did it while positively impacting people and spreading love, maybe leading a life that was an example of maybe what not to do for some. Don't go to
Hmm.
that extreme, don't push it to that limit. But for him, that's what he was called to do. And God bless him for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Natural comedian.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's
that's
beautiful,
awesome.
brother.
Yeah, this was something special, my friend. I'm really grateful for you. I look forward to further connections in the future. Are you going to be going to the retreat next year?
I plan to, yeah. Should be there, hopefully do breath work again and just enjoy listening to other people and connecting with others. That's really fun. So I plan to be there.
Yeah, that'll be great. I look forward to it. I was invited back to present and share my
Awesome.
story there. I will from
Good.
now until then. So that's next June. Here we are, the end of September. I've already, through some of the blood work and scans that I've gotten, we've shown that the tumor is already shrinking, so it's moving in the right direction. And
Dang.
whatever result we have by next June, it'll be what it's going to be, and I'll share the story and hopefully
Dude,
influence
that's
some
amazing.
people to take back power. Love
Yeah.
themselves, love each other, and take back some power.
That's so incredible, man. I'm always inspired when I hear people like you doing it, doing the work and making themselves better. We all need that. So love it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's interesting. Some people talk about it from a perspective of choice. I said there wasn't a choice. And literally when I got the diagnosis, I felt a palpable rush of energy through my body of just pure love and joy, zero fear whatsoever. And I just knew in that moment. I don't, again, this was kind of like the title of this podcast is Coach. The C is conduit. I'm just a conduit. It came through me And
Mm.
I had a sense of knowing. It was this gnosis that, hey, don't worry, don't be afraid. You know what you
Hmm.
need to do, go do it. And in doing that, and then in sharing it, I just pray that people receive the message that they too are that powerful. We have this ability within us. And if we can unplug from the matrix, unplug from our programming, and just tap back into what we were sent here for and what our purpose and passion is, that's what we're here for. So that's just my calling.
Couldn't
It's my
agree more.
gift.
I love it,
Amen.
man. Keep doing it. I'm excited to see you this summer too and to keep in touch with you and follow along your journey.
Amen. Thanks, brother. Likewise. Yeah, I will be continuing to follow and see who you have on the podcast. And I'll be sure in the show notes to let people know where to follow you, where to connect with you, and any upcoming breathwork classes that people could find you at that they could go to.
Yeah, I do offer them most Sunday nights. So I got one this Sunday, and then I share them sporadically throughout the year, and I keep them all on my website. And then I do, when I have time, I stay nice and busy with things I love. So sometimes I will do online consulting and classes like that as well. But yeah, if you ever just want to check out the website, and you're welcome to come out to Arizona and experience one. Otherwise, we could try to do it online. So
Amazing. Oh, that's great. Well, be sure to share stuff with the audience, and I will absolutely be checking that out, and we'll be talking. And getting out to Arizona sounds like it would be a pretty wonderful experience. So we'll have to put that on
yeah.
the agenda.
Yeah,
All right,
thanks for
brother.
having me. This is really fun. I love sharing, and it's fun to just be vulnerable with another person and see who can pick up on it and enjoy it.
Amen. Likewise. Yeah, this was awesome. I appreciate you. And audience, you know the drill. If you haven't already, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, share it, and go check out A Wonder Junkie. Take it all in and follow Ryan's work, and your life will improve for it. I'm certain of it. Ryan, thanks, brother. Audience, till next time, have a blessed day.
Thank you.